Commander Hayes stood on the observation deck of the United Nations headquarters and watched the ships hang in the atmosphere like enormous metal clouds. They were beautiful in a way that made him uncomfortable. Ships this big should not be beautiful. They should be threatening. They should make a person afraid, but instead felt a strange sense of relief wash over him. They had come to Earth 3 weeks ago. Their message was simple and clear. We come in peace. We offer protection. Your world has been chosen. Was 52 years old. He had spent his entire career in military service, and he had learned that nothing good ever came without strings attached. But looking at those ships now, hovering peacefully above the world's biggest city, he wondered if maybe this time was different. The elevator behind him opened. General stepped out, his weathered face showing the strain of the past few weeks. They had not slept properly since they arrived. "The world leaders are gathering," said. "They want you in the meeting room in 10 minutes. Nodded without turning away from the window. "How is the population reacting?" "Celebrations in most major cities, some riots in 3 smaller towns, but nothing we cannot control. The religious groups are split. Half think the aliens are angels, the other half think they are demons, the usual mess." Moved to stand beside. "What do you think of them?" Took a long time before answering. "I think we should be very careful about trusting them." "But you believe they want to help us." "I believe they say they want to help us. Whether that is the same thing is a different question." The meeting room was on the top floor. Sat across from President Richardson, a woman who had served her country for 40 years and was not easily impressed by anything. Next to her sat the representatives from Russia, China, India, and the European Union. Translators sat quietly in the corners, ready to convert the proceedings into every major language. Ambassador was tall, not human tall, but genuinely tall in a way that made you look up to see his face. His skin was a pale blue color, and his eyes were large and dark like still water. He wore simple clothes in silver and white, clothes that seemed to move slightly even when he was standing completely still. Behind him stood 2 other, younger, with sharper features and more nervous movements. His voice was soft but clear. "People of Earth, I greet you with respect and the hope of a long friendship between our peoples." President Richardson leaned forward slightly. "We are grateful for your arrival, Ambassador, but I must ask directly, why are you here? What do you want from Earth?" Made a gesture that seemed to mean he understood the question was fair. "Earth is a young world. Your people are developing rapidly. You have made mistakes, but you are learning. We have chosen to offer you protection as you grow into your role in the galactic community." "Protection from what?" This was speaking without thinking. The room went quiet. Turned his large dark eyes toward. For a moment nothing happened. Then made what might have been a smile, though was not completely sure. "From the dangers that exist in space, Commander Hayes. Your world is beautiful and rich. There are those in the galaxy who would take it from you if you could not defend it." "Can you be more specific?" Kept his voice steady. "What dangers? Who are these people that would take our world?" "There are many threats in the galaxy," said, and for the first time heard something that might have been discomfort in his voice. "Pirates, conquerors, species that do not value life as we do. The Alliance works to keep peace in this region of space." "But you are not telling us about a specific threat. You are telling us about general dangers." Stood up. Everyone in the room shifted, uncomfortable with the break in protocol. "With respect, Ambassador, are you protecting us from something that already knows about Earth, or are you protecting us from something that you think might eventually find us?" The silence in the room was heavy. Could feel President Richardson's eyes on him, and he knew he had just broken several rules of diplomatic conduct. But he also knew something was wrong. The ambassador's careful words, his hesitation when asked direct questions, the way his companions kept their heads down, it all suggested that they were hiding something important. Stood slowly. His 2 companions became tense, their hands moving slightly. For a moment wondered if he had just started an interstellar war by being rude to an alien. Commander Hayes said, "You are perceptive. I will be honest with you as your directness deserves honesty. The Alliance has been involved in a conflict with another species for many years. This conflict has not reached your region of space yet, but we believe it will eventually. We are establishing defensive positions around worlds we believe have potential and value. Earth is one of these worlds." The room exploded in overlapping questions. Heard fragments, "What conflict? And what species? And how long until they reach us?" But he was watching's face, and he could see something in those dark eyes, not fear exactly, but something like it. There is much to discuss, President Richardson said, raising her hand for silence. Ambassador, we appreciate your honesty, but before we agree to any military installations around our planet, we will need complete information about this threat. Of course, said, all information will be provided. But as the meeting continued, noticed that whenever specific questions were asked about the nature of the conflict or the strength of the enemy force, answers were vague. He spoke about ancient rivalries and long wars and philosophical differences. He did not speak about weapons or casualties or strategy. He did not speak about whether the alliance was winning or losing. That night could not sleep. He stood again on the observation deck, watching the ships move silently in Earth's orbit. They were beautiful and terrible and mysterious. They hung above his world like a promise and a threat at the same time. He knew that accepting protection meant trusting aliens they had only just met. He knew that Dr. Wilson was the person had ever met. She had 3D degrees, spoke 7 languages, and had spent the last 15 years studying alien technology. When came to her office late at night with his concerns about she did not laugh. She listened carefully, made notes, and then nodded. I have already noticed something, she said. They gave us access to their station databases as a gesture of goodwill, but the database is missing sections. Entire records have been removed. The encryption on the remaining files is complex, but I think I can break it. Sat in the chair across from her desk. His office was filled with papers and data screens and strange devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. How long will it take? A week, maybe less. Opened one of her data screens and showed lines of code that meant nothing to him. There is something else. I have been monitoring the radio transmissions between the ships. They use an encryption method, but my team has been recording the patterns. I do not understand their language yet, but there is something in the way they communicate with each other that is different from how they communicate with us. What do you mean? When they speak to us, they are calm and measured. When they speak to each other on the private channels, there is urgency. There is something that sounds like fear. Leaned back in her chair. Something is wrong. They are hiding more than just information about a conflict. They are hiding fear. Left's office and went directly to General's home. Was in his study, drinking whiskey and reviewing military reports. He looked up when entered. I need to do something illegal, said. Did not look surprised. Go on. I need to infiltrate one of the defense stations and retrieve information. Not to hurt them or steal their technology. Just to understand what they are not telling us. Set down his whiskey. If they find out, it will be an act of war. I know. We could lose the protection they are offering. I know that too. Was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. I have a team. They are good, very good. They can go in, get what you need, and get out without being detected. But you need to understand the risk here. If this goes wrong, if they think we are being hostile, everything changes. Everything changes anyway, said. At least this way we will know why. The team consisted of 4 people. Captain Brooks was the leader, a man with 30 years of special operations experience and the kind of calm that came from having already survived impossible situations. With him were Maria, a computer expert who could hack into almost anything, James Mitchell, a soldier who moved like smoke, and Dr. Robert King, a scientist who understood technology well enough to know what they were looking for. They went in on a night when cloud cover was heavy and the sensors were performing routine maintenance. The infiltration took 3 hours. They moved through the station like ghosts, avoiding sensors and guards. Maria's fingers flew across data terminals, extracting files in seconds. Robert photographed documents with a small camera that left no digital trace. The information they retrieved was hidden in a secure sector of the station, locked behind multiple layers of security. It took Maria 40 minutes to break through. When she did, her face went very pale. Needs to see this, she said. The files contained star charts and battle records and casualty reports. They showed a war that had been going on for 30 years. They showed entire civilizations that had been destroyed. They showed a military force called the Dominion that was advancing steadily through the galaxy, conquering or annihilating everything in their path. The Alliance was losing. In fact, the reports suggested that they were not just losing. They were retreating. They were pulling back from entire sectors of space. And they were establishing defensive positions around worlds like Earth because they expected to eventually have to make a stand. The most recent report was dated just 3 weeks before they arrived at Earth. It said that the Dominion would reach Earth's sector within 2 years, maybe less. It said that Earth was not being chosen for protection because they wanted to help humanity. Earth was being chosen as a strategic location for a final defense against an enemy that had already defeated all other attempts at resistance. Read the files 3 times. Each time the reality became clearer and more terrible. They had not come to help Earth because they wanted to be allies. They had come because they were desperate. They were using Earth as a shield. They were turning humanity into soldiers in a war that was not their choice to fight. Captain Brooks looked at the data and made a decision. "We need to prepare," he said simply, "not for protection, for war." Nodded slowly. The word war felt strange in his mouth. Earth had not fought a war against an external enemy in all of human history, but that was about to change. "I need to tell the leaders," said. "They will panic," warned. 2 years is not much time to prepare for an invasion. "Then we will have to move very fast," replied. "And we will have to do it quietly." If the you general understood war in a way that most people never would. He had studied every military conflict in human history. He knew the strategies that worked and the ones that failed. But preparing Earth for a galactic war was different from anything he had ever done before. The first problem was resources. Building weapons that could fight alien technology required materials and technology that Earth simply did not have. The second problem was time. 2 years might sound like a long period, but it was nothing when you were trying to create an entire military infrastructure from nothing. The third problem was that they had to do it in secret. If the general population knew that an alien invasion was coming, chaos would follow. Governments would fall. Economies would collapse. Society would break apart before the Dominion even arrived. So made the difficult decision to keep the information limited to a small group of military leaders, scientists, and government officials. Put together a team of the best minds Earth had to offer. Dr. Wilson led the scientific effort, working with engineers and weapons designers to create hybrid technology that combined human innovation with reverse-engineered equipment. Captain Brooks led the military training program, preparing pilots and soldiers for combat against enemies they had never faced before. Lisa Morgan, a communications specialist, worked to keep the operation secure, making sure that no information leaked to the public or to the media. Established 17 secret military bases across the globe. In underground facilities, in mountain strongholds, in hidden locations that did not appear on any official map, humans began building weapons. They built fighter ships that combined human design with propulsion systems. They built defensive stations that could protect cities from orbital attack. They built weapon systems that could attack targets in space with accuracy that would have seemed impossible just months before. But the most important development was not a weapon at all. It was the understanding that humans possessed something the aliens did not. Realized this when he visited one of the secret bases in the Nevada desert. He was watching a group of pilots training in simulator cockpits, flying mock combat scenarios against level artificial intelligence opponents. The human pilots were not the fastest flyers. They were not the most physically strong, but they were winning. A young pilot named Sarah shut down her simulator and climbed out of the cockpit, covered in sweat. Her instructor asked her how she had managed to outmaneuver the AI system 3 times in a row when the system was supposed to be unbeatable. "I made a mistake," Sarah said. "The system expected me to make the smart choice, but I was running out of fuel, so I did something stupid instead. The system did not know how to respond to stupid." Began to understand. Humans were not just smart. Humans could think in ways that did not follow logic. Humans could adapt to impossible situations. Humans could look at certain death and find a way to survive anyway. He visited a weapons facility and watched Dr. Rachel Foster show him a new type of defensive shield that she had developed. The shield used human neural patterns as its base code. It did not just respond to attacks in predictable ways. It learned from each attack and changed its response pattern. It was almost alive. "How did you think of this?" asked her. Rachel smiled. "I stopped trying to think like an engineer. I started trying to think like a mother protecting her children. A mother does not have a set of rules. She just does whatever works to keep her children safe, even if it makes no logical sense." Traveled across the planet, watching humans prepare for something they had never experienced before. He saw soldiers in South Africa training in the heat, their bodies becoming tougher and more resilient. He saw scientists in Japan developing new materials that were lighter and stronger than anything that had existed before. He saw ordinary people in India, Brazil, Canada, and Egypt, all contributing in their own ways to the effort to prepare Earth for war. What struck him most was the determination. These people knew that they might die. They knew that their sacrifice might not be enough to save the world, but they worked anyway. They trained anyway. They built anyway. Visited a construction site in the Australian outback where they were building an underground city. Workers moved through tunnels, carrying equipment and supplies. One worker, a man named Tommy, was helping to install massive steel doors that would close off entire sections of the city in case of attack. "Are you scared?" asked him. Tommy looked up from his work and considered the question seriously. "Yes," he said finally, "but my daughter is 10 years old, and I am building this so that maybe she gets to live to be 11. That is enough to keep going." Understood now that humans had a strength that went beyond physical power or technology or military strategy. Humans had the ability to care about something more than their own survival. Humans could choose to fight for their families, their communities, their world. They had not expected this. They had seen humanity as a young species that needed protection. But as watched humans prepare for war, he realized that they had misunderstood what humans were. Humans were not weak. Humans were dangerous, not because they were the strongest or the fastest but because they would die before they would surrender, because they would fight even when they had no chance of winning, because they loved their world more than they loved their own safety. By the time the 2 years had passed, Earth had changed. It was still the same planet. It still had blue oceans and green forests and cities full of people trying to live their lives. But underneath that surface, a military machine had been built. A defense network had been created. A nation of fighters had been prepared. And when the first warning came that the Dominion had entered Earth's system, humanity was ready to do so. The ships engaged the Dominion fleet at the edge of Earth's solar system. And what followed was a battle that would be remembered for the rest of human history. Plasma weapons lit up the darkness. Massive ships collided and broke apart. Thousands of alien soldiers died in the cold emptiness of space, and humanity watched from below and finally understood that the war was real. Stood in the command center with General. They had prepared for this moment for 2 years, but nothing could have prepared them for the actual sight of it. 2 enormous fleets were fighting above their world. They were fighting hard, but the Dominion was overwhelming them with numbers. For every Dominion ship that was destroyed, 2 more appeared. "Launch the fighters," said quietly. Captain Brooks had been waiting for this order. He was sitting in the cockpit of the lead fighter, a hybrid ship that Earth had built in secret. Around him, 300 other fighters began to move toward the battle zone. These were not ships. These were human ships, built by humans, flown by humans who had trained for this moment their entire lives. The commander, a being named General who commanded the fleet defending Earth's sector, was shocked when the human fighters appeared on his sensors. "What are these ships?" he demanded over the communication channel. "Your allies," said. He was speaking directly to General now, breaking protocol, breaking every rule of military communication. "Earth does not need protection anymore. Earth needs partnership." Captain Brooks led the human fighters into the battle with a tactic that the Dominion had never encountered before. They were not trying to win through superior force. They were trying to survive through unpredictable movement and sacrifice. A young pilot named Junior dove his fighter directly at a Dominion cruiser, firing his weapons at close range. The cruiser's defensive fire destroyed his ship, but not before he had damaged the Dominion vessel's targeting system. Another human pilot, a woman named Lisa, used that moment of vulnerability to strike at the same ship, destroying its shields. A third pilot, a man named Robert, moved in and finished the damaged vessel. It was not efficient, it was not beautiful, but it worked. The human fighters were dying. For every Dominion ship they destroyed, they lost fighters. The math said that they should be overwhelmed in minutes, but the human pilots did not follow the math. They fought like they had nothing to lose because they understood that they actually did have everything to lose. Their families were on the planet below. Their homes were at stake. General watched his people fight and die from the command center, and something in his face changed. He made a decision that he would later say was the most difficult decision of his life. "Redirect all civilian air traffic away from the coasts," he ordered. "Prepare the cities for orbital attack. Assume the worst." The commander was still fighting hard, but even he could see that the Dominion was beginning to break through the outer defense line. In less than an hour, the Dominion would have clear firing lanes to Earth's surface. The invasion was coming. It was coming now. Captain Brooks was flying his fighter with a smoking engine. His right wing was gone, torn off by a direct hit from Dominion fire. By all logic, he should have been dead, but he was still fighting. He still had weapons. He still had a target. He aimed his fighter at a Dominion command ship and accelerated toward it at full speed. "Brooks, what are you doing?" called from the command center. "My job," replied. His voice was calm and steady. "I am ending this." His fighter struck the Dominion command ship at point-blank range. The explosion was visible from Earth's surface, a flash of light that burned across the sky. The Dominion command ship vanished, destroyed completely, but vanished with it. Captain Brooks, the best pilot humanity had ever trained, was gone. For a moment, everything was quiet. Then something unexpected happened. The remaining Dominion ships began to retreat. They were not retreating in an organized way. They were falling back in chaos, breaking formation, abandoning their assault on Earth's defenses. Something about the destruction of their command ship, something about the willingness of the human pilots to die in combat, had shaken them. It was not that the Dominion was losing. It was that the Dominion was facing something that did not follow their rules. The Dominion expected civilizations to surrender when facing superior force. The Dominion expected species to break when they realized they could not win. But humanity did not surrender. Humanity did not break. Humanity just kept fighting, even when the fighting made no sense. General, the commander, was staring at through the communication channel. For the first time, saw something in the alien's face that looked like respect. "Your people fought well," General said. "My people fought for their home," replied. "There is a difference." As the Dominion fleet pulled back, forming a defensive perimeter at the outer edge of the solar system, understood that the battle was over, but the war was not. The first engagement had been won, but it was only the first engagement. The Dominion was massive and powerful and patient. They would be back. But Earth was ready now. Earth had tasted battle. Earth had paid the price in blood and fire and the sacrifice of brave people like Captain Brooks, and Earth had survived. Turned to General and made a quiet statement. "We need to prepare for a much the funeral for Captain Brooks took place on a quiet day in Arlington Cemetery, stood with his hands folded as they lowered the empty casket into the ground. There was no body. There was nothing to bury, but had earned a grave and a memorial, and the world would remember his name. The battle in orbit had changed everything. The Dominion's retreat had given Earth a breathing space, but everyone understood that it was temporary. The Dominion had lost one command ship and a significant portion of its advance fleet. They had not lost their desire to conquer. They had simply learned that conquering Earth would be more difficult than they had expected. Was promoted to Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. It was not a position he had wanted, but it was a position that Earth needed. He moved into a command center buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, in a location that no map showed and no government officially acknowledged. From that command center, watched as the rest of the galaxy learned about what had happened above Earth. The news spread through communications channels and data networks and whispered conversations between alien species. Humanity had fought. Humanity had not surrendered. Humanity had hurt an enemy that most civilizations in the galaxy feared. That news changed things. Within months, colonies that had been under Dominion occupation began to rebel. Species that had thought resistance was impossible started to organize. The reputation of the Dominion, which had been built on the foundation of unstoppable conquest, began to crack. Received a message from General, the commander, wanted to meet, was cautious about this request, but he agreed. They met in a neutral space station orbiting Mars. When arrived, he found not just General, but Ambassador as well. Its appearance had changed. The alien looked tired, worn down by something more than just the stress of battle. "I owe you an apology," said without any of the diplomatic language that usually surrounded alien negotiations. "The Alliance came to Earth with the assumption that you were a weak civilization that needed our help. We were wrong. You are not weak. You are simply young. There is a great difference." Sat down across from the commander and spoke with the same directness. "You came to Earth because you were losing a war. You came here because you needed a military position to help you survive. You came here without asking us if we wanted to be part of your war." That is true, said. I cannot change the past, but I can change the future. The Alliance would like to offer Earth something new, not protection, partnership. Humans have shown something that most civilizations have lost. You have shown the willingness to die for something you love. That is a strength that cannot be measured by weapons or technology. Knew that was trying to repair a relationship that had been built on lies and manipulation. But he also understood that they had changed their minds about humanity. They had seen what humans were capable of. They had seen that humans could create miracles in times of desperation. General added his own words. We have been fighting the Dominion for 30 years. In that time, we have lost territories and civilizations and hope. Since Earth joined the conflict, the war has changed. The Dominion has begun to retreat. Species that we thought were lost have begun to resist. One small world has done what the entire Alliance could not do alone. Do you understand what that means? Understood. It meant that humanity had the power to change the galaxy, not because humans were stronger than anyone else, but because humans were willing to pay any price to protect what they loved. In the months that followed, Earth and the Alliance worked together. Human fighters equipped with better technology and working alongside warriors began to push the Dominion back. It was not fast, it was not easy, but it was effective. Traveled to dozens of worlds that had been under Dominion occupation. He saw the damage that conquest had done to alien civilizations. He saw what happened when resistance was not possible, when surrender seemed to be the only option. And he understood why Earth's refusal to surrender had meant so much. In a conquered colony world, an alien named approached. Was a member of a species that had surrendered to the Dominion 5 years before without any real resistance. His people had survived, but they had lost everything that made them worth surviving for. Show us how to fight like humans do, said. Teach us to resist, we have forgotten how. Spent months teaching beings from a dozen different species what humans already knew. He taught them that surrender meant death. He taught them that fighting might also mean death, but it meant dying with dignity. He taught them that sometimes the greatest victory was not in winning, but in refusing to lose. The turning point came when decided to send out a message to every being in the galaxy who was suffering under Dominion rule. He sat down in front of a camera, and he spoke from his heart. I am Hayes, I am a human, my species is young, we are not the strongest in the galaxy, we are not the or the fastest or the most advanced, but we know something that I think many of you have forgotten. We know that there are things worth dying for. We know that surrender is not survival if it costs you your soul. We know that love for your home, love for your families, love for your freedom is stronger than any weapon. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I stand before you as a representative of a species that refused to be conquered. And I tell you that if we can do it, you can do it too. Not because we are special, but because you are stronger than you believe you are. Stand up. Resist. Fight for your homes, fight for your families, fight for your freedom. The Dominion expects you to surrender. Prove them wrong. The message was sent across every communication channel in the galaxy. Within hours, uprisings began on 100 different worlds. Species that had accepted Dominion rule began to organize. The machinery of conquest began to break down. The Dominion still existed. They were still powerful, but they were no longer unstoppable. They had learned that they could be hurt. They had learned that humans and the species that learned from humans would not accept slavery without a fight. Stood on the command deck of a new military station, built in orbit around Earth, and watched as the final battles of the first phase of the war were fought. The Dominion was still trying to expand, but they were expanding into resistance now, instead of into unopposed conquest. General joined on the observation deck. The old general had aged significantly during the war. His hair had gone completely white, and his face was marked by the weight of decisions made and soldiers lost. We did it, said quietly. We actually did it. A species that did not even know about interstellar war 2 years ago just changed the galaxy. It cost us, said, thinking of Captain Brooks and the thousands of pilots and soldiers who had died defending Earth. Everything costs something, replied. But we paid with our lives on our terms, that is worth something. Ambassador appeared on the observation deck behind them. He was there to deliver a formal message from the Alliance leadership. Earth has been invited to join the Galactic Council as a full-member civilization with voting rights and equal voice, said. You are no longer a protected world. You are now recognized as a full participant in galactic affairs. And exchanged a glance. They both understood what this meant. Earth was no longer a young world waiting for protection. Earth was a power that the galaxy would have to reckon with. As looked out at the stars, he thought about humanity's journey. Just 2 years ago, humans believed they needed alien protection. Now it was other species that were looking to humans to teach them how to resist. It was not because humans had become the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. It was because humans had something that power could not buy: the will to survive, the courage to fight, and the love of home that could make anyone unstoppable. The stars burned brightly above Earth, and Hayes, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces, watched them with the knowledge that humanity had proven something fundamental about the nature of strength. Strength was not about technology. Strength was not about physical power or military advantages. Strength was about refusing to give up. Strength was about caring about something more than your own survival. Strength was about standing your ground and fighting, even when the odds were impossible. That was what made humans dangerous. That was what made humans worth saving. That was what made Earth a world that would not be conquered, not by any force in the galaxy. Turned away from the window and began making plans for the next phase of the war. There was still much work to do. There was still much fighting ahead. But humanity would face it not as victims, but as warriors. And that made all the difference. Gerworth nodded. He understood. The sky above Earth had changed that day. It had been a sky of peace and protection. Now it was a sky of conflict and uncertainty. But it was also a sky that humanity could defend. And that made all the difference. Mething the galaxy had never seen before. They were ready to defend themselves. The situation, they might change their plans. They might decide Earth is more trouble than it is worth. Understood what that would mean. If they abandoned Earth, the world would be defenseless against an enemy that had already destroyed 7 other civilizations. Humanity would have 2 years to develop weapons and strategies with no help at all. It was a terrible choice, but it was also the only choice that made sense. That night began making phone calls to the leaders he trusted. He told them the truth about the Dominion. He told them about the war that was coming. He told them that humanity would have to prepare to defend itself, not because it wanted to, but because there was no other option. And slowly, secretly, very carefully, Earth began to prepare for an invasion that most of the planet's population did not even know was coming. Refusing the offer might leave Earth defenseless against threats they did not understand. He knew that either choice could destroy everything humanity had built. Pressed his hand against the cold glass and made a decision. Tomorrow, he would begin investigating what they were really hiding. He would find out what that hidden conflict was really about. He would discover the truth about the enemy that was coming, even if they did not want to tell him. Because if Earth was going to face an unknown threat, humanity deserved to know what it was facing. Watched the alien ships float in Earth's sky and waited for the truth to reveal itself.